You can now hear Movie Heaven, Movie Hell on Stitcher. Stitcher is radio on demand. Listen anytime, anywhere. Stitcher is an award-winning free app that lets you listen to all your favourite shows, plus discover from 20,000 news, entertainment and sports shows. You can also create your own custom playlists. Stitcher is available on iOS, Android, Nook, iPad and in over 4 million car dashboards. It's on demand and it's on the go. No downloading, no syncing, no wasted memory. You can stream your favourite podcasts from Stitcher. Don't have Stitcher? Download it free today at Stitcher.com or in the App Store. And please, leave us a review and rating on Stitcher. Thank you. Welcome to Movie Heaven, Movie Hell with me, Simon Aitken, and
I'm Keith Eyles, and we are both independent filmmakers who enjoy discussing movies, TV shows, and related media. And for this bonus episode, we are really pleased to welcome back to the podcast filmmaker and friend Dan Tomeu. So welcome back, Dan.
Oh, thank you so much. Glad to be back so soon.
I was going to say, it does feel very quick, doesn't it? Because obviously you joined us recently for our Here We Go Again, the appropriately titled further analysis of Star Wars and The Last Jedi and whatever.
The final analysis.
I was going to say, maybe you should do one more called Kicking the Dead Horse One More Time.
There you go. It's I don't know what more we could say about it. So someone did comment though that apparently I was the most negative of all about it. So I was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I came across quite like that. I thought I was a bit fence city, but maybe not. There you go. But anyway, in that one, James Cheshire, who sadly can't join us this afternoon, but he mentioned whether anyone had yet seen Ready Player One, which kind of made us have this somewhat impromptu podcast to discuss not only Ready Player One, but the sort of recent wave of nostalgia in film and television shows and franchises and whatever. So here we are again. I don't know how many people we've lost at this point.
Just don't say The Last Jedi.
Yes. Again.
Just don't say it.
So obviously the latest wave of nostalgia is for the 80s. It's 80s culture and films that's sort of seeping into a lot of the films and TV.
Exactly. Which is totally, I guess, pandering to us as film geeks, because we're all children of the 70s, which sort of grew up loving this stuff in the 80s. And it's quite funny actually, because if you look at Ready Player One, it actually pretty much references most of the films and directors that we've talked about in the sort of last 2.5 years or whatever of this podcast. So it's almost like a perfect movie for us to discuss.
Well, let's just let the audience know that we will be going into spoilers. So if you've not seen the film, just to warn you, we will probably spoil it.
Yeah, probably. Well, first of all, the first question I want to ask about Ready Player One and you guys is, did you see it? Because I was somewhat torn in this particular case. Did you see it in 2D or 3D?
2D.
2D.
2D. Oh, we were all 2D or not 2D. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I saw it in 2D because it tends to be my default thing unless a film is specifically shot for 3D. But I did think whilst watching it, particularly on the scenes within the OASIS, that it might actually loan itself quite well to 3D. But I've only seen it the once so far. But if I go and see it again, which is which is quite probable. I may actually try seeing it in 3D just to see if it sort of did add anything and sort of, add into that whole sort of virtual reality aspect of the film. But I don't know what Spielberg's thoughts are on things like that, because I know he's kind of a purist when it comes to a lot of this stuff, isn't he?
Yes.
Yes, but I mean, seeing as most of the film is computer generated, I don't know, you might not mind on this case.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I usually like to see it first in 2D and then go to the other formats after that if I really like the movie.
Yeah.
Just, then I feel like that next viewing, adds something at least.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's I don't know what you guys thought, but I was interested to see sort of, Spielberg go back to doing, the type of films he did when we were growing up, and whether he still had that sort of, sparkle of the sort of popcorn magic within him, because obviously, a lot of his films nowadays, fantastic films, are obviously, much more weighty and historical based and serious and very good. I mean, I loved the film he made in between the primary shoot and post production of this was The Post, which I thought was absolutely fantastic and actually works as a really good companion piece to All the President's Men. It's like a kind of unofficial prequel to you can almost watch them back to back, and they work really well. It's just that Tom Hanks becomes Jason Robards, but other than that, those two films play really well together and are both excellent films. But it was kind of I was kind of interested to see him go back and do something that's a bit more of a sort of fantasy adventure type thing. And for my money, I thought he knocked it out of the park. I really had fun with this. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it certainly captured some of that early magic that Spielberg had. I don't know that it captured all of the magic per se. Even though it had pretty much everything in place. I mean, even the retro soundtrack, even the score itself was very 80s, kind of 90s sounding. Not Hans Zimmer pounding away at drums and that sort of thing. But
Yes.
The kids kind of element, and of course, all the 80s references and such. But even the action sequences and such all seem to be, true form for Steven Spielberg.
Well, I really enjoyed it. I must admit, when I went in to see it, I wasn't sure if it was going to be good or not. So I'm kind of very picky about the films I go and see. But I really enjoyed this one, and I felt that I got the full effect seeing it in the cinema. Even though there was so many references in it, it was.
It's almost as bad as one of our podcasts, isn't it, for references?
No, it's worse, much worse. But I was going to say, the thing is, though, was that I didn't feel that it overshadowed the story. It wasn't that thing that... It wasn't like in the forefront so much. It was more background. And it wasn't just about, oh, look, here's a reference to this, here's a reference to that, here's a reference to this, there's these characters, that character, it was... I thought it was handled very well.
I have to say, as far as the references, I was actually a little disappointed that they were so much in the background, and a lot of that was the way it was, I say in air quotes, lit, because it's all computer generated essentially. But the way they chose to light the scenes put most everybody in silhouette, so it was hard to see certain characters. I don't know. I would like to have seen a little bit more of some of the characters that were floating around the background than what we saw. But no, it still was good. Yeah.
I think it would become distracting because I think the story was very much the forefront, because there was nothing in it that took you out the story. I mean, there's been like kind of cameos and nods in other films, like say Rogue One, where you see two characters from a cantina and wonder how the hell are they here, And then to find out that this literally takes place like a day or two or days before A New Hope begins, you're like, so if they were there, how did they get to Tatooine? What?
Well, they had a really bad week. Basically.
Yes.
They were like, phew, glad we got out of that city before it was destroyed. Oh, I know. Let's lie low in Tatooine for a few days and just have a few drinks, and then end up getting their arm lopped off and whatever. It's like that's karma.
They need to go back and start making better life choices.
Maybe it was because there were so many. There were so many that you just couldn't keep up with it. There was nothing glaring because the references were just there on the screen all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, this film is one of those films where you can go back and watch it multiple times, and even probably freeze frame it and be picking things out for ages. I know that there are things online that actually point out something like 350 visual references in the film, in the background and all crazy stuff like that. But I almost felt like it was kind of the inside of my head on screen, if you know what I mean, because obviously there was all the movies and TV shows and video games, and but also all the sort of musical references as well, the pop music of the time, and all of that sort of thing. And for ages when I was watching it to start with, because I didn't know anything about it before going to see it, and when they were going through the first game, I was kind of scratching my head a little bit, because I was thinking, okay, so this takes place in sort of 2044 or whatever it is, and the world all changed like a decade from now in 2028 or whatever. They had this what they called it, the broadband wars or whatever it was, and all of that stuff. And I thought, but why are all these references largely sort of from the 80s and 90s? Because it doesn't make sense. Why would the kids be referencing that? And then it wasn't until the Simon Pegg and Mark Rylance characters came, and you sort of realize, oh right, yeah, that they're going to be, that their characters are a similar age to what will be in 10 years time. And it's like, okay, so they grew up in the same era we did, and obviously it all made total sense then. But I was a little distracted by it to start with, because I was thinking, why in the future would everybody be obsessed with these things from the from the 80s and whatnot? But that's having not read the book or knowing the sort of story behind it prior to seeing it.
Yeah, I have to say it took a little while to warm up. I must admit, at the beginning I was kind of like, I was really kind of on the fence at the beginning. I was like, oh, I don't know about this. This is a bit, when he's in the stacks and he's scaling down all the different sort of, I don't know, were they caravans or trailers?
Yeah, the trailer stacks. Yeah. Kind of thing.
And he's going past all the people who are doing all the, you can see them online and stuff like that, and and then he goes in, and I was just like, oh, okay, this is fine, but I'm not really, getting into it. But then, I think it was once the race started, and you found out more about the creator of the OASIS. What was his name?
Was it
Halliday, yeah. Dying and setting this contest up. Then I sort of got drawn into it a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, have either of you guys actually read the novel?
No,
I haven't, no. But everybody that I know has. So I was asking them, I was like drilling them for questions about after the fact, what's different, what's the same. And actually in the novel, at the beginning of the novel, apparently there's a huge section about how much the 80s culture has invaded pop culture because of the OASIS and because of Halliday. And that was something they pretty much left out of the movie, because in the movie, in the novel, apparently everything is 80s. In the movie, there's a lot of 90s, and there's modern references to video games and other things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But in the novel, there's not. Apparently, it's all 80s. So in his trailer, there was a bag of Dorito chips on the table, and it was an old style 80s bag of Doritos chips, like the actual design of the bag itself.
Oh right.
So I mean, that goes along with the book in the sense that 80s culture has just permeated society so much because of this Oasis and because of how much that they're in there, that everything, including advertising and marketing for things in the real world, still follow kind of that 80s flavor.
Yeah.
But the movie didn't really say that, and because of that, they I don't know. I feel like that was a kind of a missed opportunity, because I mean, it was a little off-putting. Even knowing that was the thing, it was a little off-putting. And until you see the characters, you're like, okay, that makes a little bit of sense. But even still, you're like, well, but why? Like, because especially Halliday, when there was that scene with Halliday and Simon Pegg's character, which I don't remember his name, but they were wearing 80s clothes, like very 80s clothes. And we don't wear 80s clothes, now. So it was, what I mean, like.
What do you mean? I'm sat here in my Don Johnson Miami Vice outfit, right?
Well,
right
let's say the rest of us don't wear 80s clothes, except for super unhip Keith.
Oh dear.
So, but no, it was.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of it was quite on the nose, and you're right. And it was kind of a bit of everything. I mean, obviously there was a lot of 80s in there, but you're absolutely right. I mean, they had a lot of stuff from 90s and 2000s as well. It was kind of a bit of everything, really. What I thought was interesting is, as much as all the stuff that was seen on screen, was the amount of stuff that actually, for various reasons, couldn't be. For example, in the novelization, or the book, not the novelization, the book. In the book that this was based on, there's a hell of a lot of Blade Runner reference, which even though it's the same studio, they couldn't do that because they were making 2049 at the same time, so they veered from that. And then also because of obviously competing Disney, they couldn't have any sort of Star Wars, MCU, or Tron references, which would have all seemed quite obvious. Obviously the Millennium Falcon gets a mention, but obviously there's nothing visual in there. In fact, I quite like the fact that they sort of replaced it with Battlestar Galactica, which obviously I smiled at.
Saying that, I heard the sound of a TIE fighter at one point, so there was an audio reference.
Well, I think I even saw the back of an X-wing at some point.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah, there was a part in the beginning where a bunch of ships flew by, and I think one of them was an X-wing.
Quite possibly.
Are you sure it wasn't a Viper? You sure it wasn't?
It could be. Yeah, there was a Viper in the background in the warehouse or what have you. So there were several cool ships back there.
Sure.
Yeah, did you know that the shine? Well, I guess spoilers.
Spoilers, yes.
Here come the spoilers. The scene in the Shining, wasn't in the book at all.
That's right, yes, and I'm sure that was something that was put in by Spielberg. I must admit, I'm sitting here while we're recording wearing my Jack Torrance T-shirt, so because that was my favourite part.
No play,
and it was I must admit, my jaw actually drops. That especially when they walk in there and they're actually in the Overlook Hotel.
Yeah, no, it was perfect.
Yeah, they must have used footage from the film. I think the shot, with the opening shot, was probably the bit where Jack Torrance is coming down the stairs or something, and they just removed him. But it was amazing how it just that whole stuff worked.
I actually just read an article about that scene, and they said that most of it was CGI. Believe it or not.
Wow.
The only parts that weren't CGI were when people were, like the twins were in there, or when there were actual people in the scene or in the room 227. Those were a built set with a person.
Oh right.
But yeah, and then they did use a couple shots from the film to overlay, but overall, mostly it was a CGI recreation of that set. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's mad. And I mean, you know, I think like you said, Simon, that was a you know, a Spielberg homage to Kubrick. You know, was to go there.
Just the fact that such that all the connections between Spielberg and Kubrick and The Shining, because the fact was that production was delayed on Temple of Doom, because was it Temple of Doom or Raiders? Because of
Probably Raiders,
because they were using Elstree Studios to film The Shining, and of course he burnt part of it down. He burnt part of Elstree Studios down. There was a fire at the end of The Shining when they were filming there, because he took over the whole place. So there's that, and the whole clue about the artist who didn't like his creation or what was done with his creation. The whole Stephen King, Kubrick thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, no, that was good. I mean, I had a big smile on my face there because actually, Dan, when I last saw you last year, I was lucky enough to go to Universal's Halloween Horror Nights over in Florida, and I don't know whether you went to it at all, Dan, but they actually had one of the mazes was The Shining, and and they did it so well. I mean, it was so well done, and you know, it brought a smile to my face because, you know, just a few months back I was doing that, and then I thought, oh, and now these characters are doing exactly that. So you know, it was really good to see that. But because apparently in the book, that part is War Games.
That's right. Yes.
Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where they actually sort of reenact the scenes. Yeah. And they decided, you know, not to go there and do it that way. And just try and make it a bit more visual.
It's very geeky from what I heard, because you have to know you have to be word perfect.
Well, and the other thing is especially with a film this size, I mean, how much of the pop culture is still connected to War Games anymore? I mean, does anybody even remember War Games? I mean, we do.
Yeah. I think if you say, "Shall we play a game?" people understand what that reference is. I mean, it's.
You know, I hope
they all think it's Saw now.
Yeah. You want me to tell you the saddest thing ever? I went to see this movie with a couple guys from work. One was in his 30s. One was in his late 20s. Neither one of them had seen The Shining even.
Oh my God.
Or War Games. So neither one would have made a difference. But there, I mentioned a few references out of it. I was like, oh, I saw this, I saw that, and they had no idea, hadn't seen any of this stuff. But The Shining, I was like, The Shining, come on.
Well, that was the only thing about that scene. I was thinking, well, people who watched Ready Player One and then go and see The Shining are going to be really disappointed, because there's not this like massive zombie woman with an axe running around. It's like they're going to be a little bit disappointed when it's like, you know, just Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, it's just a ballroom. Oh well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, didn't they do that brilliantly? But you know what? This whole point actually does sort of beg the question, which some have said is this film just really a shallow nostalgia fest aimed at people like us, or is it actually a good film? You know, that I've heard the argument that that, you know, both about the book, you know, about Ernest Cline's book, and also this film just being, you know, not having any real sort of substance, and just being literally a you know, a fanboy's you know, fantasy and nothing more. And I don't know, because for me, I think there is a little bit of a social message in this, but I just wonder what you guys thought.
Well, I've said this before to you already, Keith. We've had this little conversation. I was kind of bothered by the ending. So, and I'll tell you what I mean. So, at the beginning of the film, we're shown this world, which is, you know, it's falling apart. It's people aren't bothered. because they're all in the Oasis still, you know, they've got their heads in the sand. So the planet around them is sort of decaying and going to hell. And so at the end of the film, it didn't feel like there was any change when it came to that. You see our hero and the girl, and they've got a nice apartment, and you know they're doing all right. And you know they say, oh, and you know we shut down the Oasis on 2 days a week, but people are quite annoyed with us for that. But I got no sense that through them gaining control of the Oasis, that anything was going to happen to the world. Yes, they shut down the evil company, and they've stopped doing those sort of labor camps. But I really felt, well, you've set up this world where it's it's in decay, it's crumbling, it's in a terrible state, and now you're in control of sort of the world's currency, and you don't seem to be doing anything about it. And it did kind of bother me a little bit. I do understand it's a film, it's a fantasy, and that the goal of the film was that that the hero, Parsival or Wade, he wins the prize. But it felt a bit hollow when the world's is going to fuck.
No, I wasn't upset with the fact that it was basically just a simple story, just a fantasy with where the boy gets the girl, and they were just trying to tell a story of this particular moment in time in this universe, this world that they'd created. Except for, which is much to Simon's point, that when you set up a dystopian world like that, there almost needs to be some sort of some progression there. Some sort of an answer to that at the end as well, and why? Because the dystopian world is what kind of created the Oasis. So if you've now controlled the Oasis, then you should be able to maybe affect back into the dystopian world. Whereas if it was a world like we live in and they had the Oasis, it wouldn't matter. It would just be like, yay, we won, and that was it. We got $1 million or whatever, $1 zillion. But yeah, so I do agree with that point, that it's weird that they had that world and then nothing really happened there when Wade won the contest.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that kind of bothered me as well was that with the evil corporation, they seem to be acting like a private police force. So I was really quite surprised when the actual police turned up at the end. I'm like, where the hell have you been throughout this whole film? Especially when there's been that explosion at the stacks, and there was like no, you didn't see any police or anything, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I mean there are problems there. I mean, let's be honest. This future world that they set up, I mean, it is massively dystopian. Obviously incredibly classist by the looks as well, and let's be honest, not a particularly nice place to live. However, the sort of societal message about it is one could almost see this happening because corporations are when it becomes to entertainment and intellectual properties and whatever, and that whole thing about entertainment versus money making enterprises, and this whole sort of thing about, they say millennials don't get out and have enough exercise and all of this sort of stuff, and they spend too long playing video games and all of that sort of thing. So it's a little bit there, but they don't really go there, do they? It's kind of it's kind of just about sort of the idea is tickled rather than explored. I sort of felt, and but that's okay. I mean, it's all right for it just to be a fun movie, and I had a really fun time with it. So I'm not dissing it for that fact, but there are those sort of people who are negative about both the book and the film as just being that sort of bit of mindless, shallow nostalgia.
Yeah.
It's you know.
Considering what Spielberg has said in the past about the state of Hollywood, do you think this was a dig at Hollywood? Do you think that the evil corporation was Hollywood?
Oh gosh, you may be right.
You might be, yeah.
Yeah, you might be right. That's a good point. Because
you know,
because he's. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the artist Spielberg at odds with the businessman Spielberg, isn't it?
Mhm.
If you know what I mean. So yeah, that is a tricky one, and
Yeah.
and I think it could be. I don't know whether that's just something to read into it or whether that's actual intention. I don't know. What is the answer to that, or my answer? I don't know.
I'll just clarify for people who don't know what I mean. A couple of years ago, Spielberg went on record saying that Hollywood was heading for a fall if it kept going down this route of just making blockbuster films of like superhero films and stuff, because at some point people are going to stop seeing those, because this feeding viewers the same thing over and over again, people get bored. There's only so much of like a superhero film that people will take before they start walking out. We've seen it in the past. We saw it happen to the musicals. People stopped going.
And the Western.
The
musical and then the Western.
Yeah. And they're spending more and more money on these films, and they have to bring back bigger returns. To think that, back in the late 70s, one film, took down a studio, Heaven's Gate. And yet we have films out there now that cost 10 times, 100 times more than Heaven's Gate does, and they have the ability to do far more damage. So having this sort of corporation that's always sort of trying to make money out of nostalgia, it's kind of like the state of Hollywood right now.
Oh, big time. I mean, look at the films I mean, it's quite funny. It's a shame James isn't on here, because I think he kind of started to make a point about, would this be the film that would sort of break the back of reboots and franchises and nostalgia stuff. Yeah. Obviously being absolutely bloody filled to the brim with it itself as a movie. But it's an interesting one, and I've been thinking. Yeah, I think about this stuff way too much, but I've been thinking a lot about this film really appealed to me, and I was kind of thinking, well, what does that say about me? And the discussions we've been sort of having about the fact that I absolutely loved Rogue One, for example, which was a total nostalgia fest, if there is anything. I really enjoyed the Force Awakens, which is again very derivative of New Hope, and as I got feedback, I'm somewhat negative about Last Jedi, which is trying to break the mold. So yeah, it's
That's it. We just lost everybody.
Yeah, we've lost the whole audience. They're all gone. Trust me, they tuned out years ago. but yeah, it's and this is happening. I mean, we've got TV shows now that are all literally based on nostalgia and doing really well. And a lot of that 80s as well. So yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, I don't really know what the answer is, but it's an interesting one to explore.
It's a weird time, and as a father, what's strange is I think this has got to be one of the few times in history where the properties that I grew up with are the same properties that exist now, and my kids play with and enjoy. Yeah. So I didn't share that with my dad, and I doubt he shared it with his dad. Not in the same way. That would have been more normal, everyday life things. But like movies and TV and that sort of stuff, that's the same stuff that I watched as a kid is still popular today, and maybe even more so in some ways. And it's weird to see, that, like here we are in our 40s, and here are kids, much younger, who absolutely enjoy the exact same thing that we enjoyed when we were exactly their age. So I mean, I think that feeds a lot into why we're seeing a lot of this too.
I mean, from that point of view, that is
Yeah.
really nice because, you know, there's not much that me and my father, you know, had in common. So to think that if I had children, that there would be things, you know, that I would have a common, you know, parlance with my own child. But I also think that's kind of a bad thing because it just shows we don't seem to be moving on. You know,
right?
Once all these properties run out, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, yes, okay, the thing Star Wars is, you know, comes from Lucas wanting to make Flash Gordon, and the people who owned Flash Gordon went, nah, you can't have it. So he came up with his own thing, and it, you know, where are those films? You know, just this weird thing where we're kind of in this circle at the moment where, you know, films that are coming out of the cinema, you know, are just remakes or rehashes of films that we saw 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Hollywood has always done that in the history of cinema, but the difference now is it is literally it's that kind of content versus corporation type thing. I mean, you know, like your example with Star Wars and Flash Gordon is a good one, and also you know, one could say Indiana Jones in the sort of, you know, B movies of the 40s and 50s and whatever, right? Those serialized adventures. But so you know, filmmakers have always done this, and what's interesting about Ready Player One is actually Spielberg is almost, you know, a generation older doing that, because most of the filmmakers that are our generation, you know, the same sort of age as us guys, are making these films that are now referencing everything. And you know, Spielberg, I guess, was being careful not to self-reference himself too much in this, but instead his peers around him, like Robert Zemeckis, obviously, you know, is massively referenced.
Yes.
To the Zemeckis cube or whatever it is.
That's it. Yes, there's a Zemeckis cube.
But you know, but now it's about these are properties, aren't they? They're corporate properties as opposed to just an idea or a concept or a premise. It's gone beyond that. It's gone to the product, hasn't it? It's interesting, and you know, we grew up in that totally. You know,
yes, there's always been remakes, but the thing is, the remakes have come from artists. So if we take The Thing, you know, it is a remake of the Howard Hawks film, but it's completely different. You know, they went back to the original source material and they come up with this original design for a creature. The fact that it didn't have one shape, it had many forms. It wasn't a guy who was in a kind of Frankenstein kind of outfit, you know, going along, going. He's supposed to be a vegetable, yes. Going, yeah. They went and did something completely different. You know, went back to the source material, made it more about paranoia. You know, there's a couple of scientists, but you didn't have like military men, or, you know, it wasn't so. You know, they did something different. The films that are being made now, they are exactly the same. It's like they cannot change it. It's like if you're making a Star Wars film, you got to have these things in it, and it's got to follow this storyline.
I mean, again, another guilty one of myself, being totally about nostalgia, is, you know, we're always talking about the MCU films, and the sort of forgotten film in the MCU is actually the Incredible Hulk, the Ed Norton version. Obviously, you know, it's been completely wrecked on with Ruffalo, who's great as well, you know. But you know, a lot of the reason I loved that film was because it was a nostalgia film to Kenneth Johnson's 70s stroke 80s TV series. So, you had the Lonely Man theme in there. The casting of Ed Norton was very, he was much more similar to a Bill Bixby type than say Mark Ruffalo is, for example. They had the eyes as the trigger for his
Transformation.
his transformation. They even in the beginning titles, reference the whole gamma radiation machine and everything, right down to almost an identical shot from the 70s. And of course, I loved all that shit because I loved that old TV show from when I was a kid. But and obviously Marvel have moved away from that, and probably rightly so. But it is interesting that it's sort of. I'm wondering, if you and I, all of us here, aspired to become, big time filmmakers, and we're doing our own little projects. But if we were there in the Hollywood system and we were fortunate enough to be doing that as a job, would we be doing the same things? Would we be referencing all the shit that we loved when we were growing up? And I don't know the answer to that, because I think probably I put references galore in my short films as it is, so ones that I can't get sued for, I might point out, but tiny references. And the thing with this is this was, by its own intention and by its own story, completely unsubtle in every way, shape and form. It wasn't a nod, it wasn't a tip of the hat, it was a blatant let's go there reference from all aspects of culture, pop culture, should I say, but not just the movies, everything. And like you were saying at the beginning, Dan, about Doritos, for heaven's sake, it's a really interesting debate, I guess, which I get, I think will be going on for quite a long time, I expect.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I do think if I was put in that position, I would probably fall right into that same category and do the references and be thrilled by it, doing it. I mean, I'd have to say, because, how exciting would it be to be, making a Star Wars movie or an Indiana Jones movie or a MCU or whatever, one of your favorite characters.
Absolutely. I mean, JJ and, Jon Favreau and, all of these guys that are doing this stuff, they're only, they're only a few years older than us. They're essentially still Generation X's,
right.
And, and they love these things. And a lot of the showrunners on TV series now are massive fanboys that kind of,
absolutely.
Got into it. So, I don't know. I mean, I think in the case of Ready Player One, I look at it as a piece of harmless entertainment. It's not like it's the only type of thing that Spielberg's knocking out. He's doing his. I liken it to when he went and made Jurassic Park, and then while the post production for that was going on, he went and did Schindler's List, which no doubt is his most important film of his career, right? So I look at this as kind of, he shot this, and then while they were spending the years doing the visual effects aspect of this, he went and made the post, and he's lucky enough that he can have a foot in each camp, if you like, and do that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because art is, an art and entertainment, they don't need to be mutually exclusive. That they can be, you can do both at the same time, and that's what the great stuff is, really.
Yeah. I just want to ask you a question though about would I be doing references and stuff, and would I do references. I think as filmmakers we like referencing the things we like. It's a natural thing. I think it's very difficult not to do that, because we don't live in bubbles. We're part of this world. So there's lots of influences and stuff, and you want to put that in your stories. Though when it would come to actually working on one of these films, I don't know how well I would do personally. I don't know if I could toe the line. At the end of the day, I think if we're on the same page, great. If not, then there's going to be a lot of creative differences.
Oh yeah.
And I just want to say, we've seen a lot of directors fall out with these projects. I mean, Solo, the original directors left because of creative differences. And from what I hear, because those guys are into improvisation, doesn't kind of have the right fit for Star Wars. I don't know. I mean, I've not seen what they did. It might have been interesting. It might have been something different. But then it might have been the 21 Jump Street of Star Wars, which it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But then, but when I think about Edgar Wright being fired from Ant-Man, I do wonder what it was that he wanted to do that was so offensive or just so wrong that he was, completely kicked off that project.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing, because the studios are now essentially run by corporations. All of these things are, largely down to committee and whatever now. And I think, if you want to be a sort of true independent film, a true auteur or whatever, then you do have to be an independent filmmaker to a certain extent, because the franchise films and the blockbusters, particularly with the amount of money and whatever involved now, the studio has massive influence on this stuff.
Yes.
But I mean, I think the thing with the whole, it almost feels like, because of social media and whatever now, it almost feels like this thing about directors and creative differences and being replaced and all this is kind of a thing, a new thing that's happening. But I mean, Gone with the Wind got through about 4 directors. I mean, this has been going on for the history of cinema. It's just we didn't know so much about it.
I just want to say though, there's a trend at the moment to get new directors to do these films, and before it would have been more seasoned directors they would have brought on to these projects. And the feeling I get when you see that is that they feel that they can have more control over a new director or somebody with less of a track record, so that they can get their own way. It seems that Hollywood has not learnt the lesson of Alien 3. You can't have all these cooks in the kitchen and have a product that's any good, or the best it could be.
Yeah. Now we had to get Alien in there, didn't we? I mean, but your point, and of course Alien features quite heavily in Ready Player One. But there you go. But yeah, your point is the same point that kind of Ridley Scott was quite vocal about recently. About the fact that they're letting sort of inexperienced, almost like first-time filmmakers that are kids essentially make these films. And I guess he's saying that because they're not coming to him, perhaps. But
the kettle calling the pot black, because how many films did Ridley Scott make before he directed Alien? 1.
Yeah, well, yes, yeah,
yeah,
no, absolutely. But also, I mean, what's interesting to that point as well is the fact that these dudes that were doing Solo were replaced by Ron Howard, who is a very seasoned director. So, with a massive track record and a lot of variety in what he's done. So,
but also somebody who's been known to toe the line.
Well,
true.
maybe more of No, it's who knows what goes on.
I do get a sense though now more than ever that the business side of the movie business is forefront. Is much more in the forefront than it used to be, in the sense that I feel like we get lots of sequels to movies that weren't good in the first place. Like, how many Transformers movies do we need to see?
Yeah.
That really aren't. And I've decided or realized actually in the last maybe 2 Transformers ago or so, I'm like, these movies aren't made for me. They're made for China. They're not. They're made for the other parts of the world that really eat these up, and they're not always made for American audiences or audiences.
But they're made to sell toys, aren't they, as well?
Well,
I mean, yes, they're made to sell.
Yeah, a bit. But I mean, like none of them have gotten good reviews, but they've all made great money. Or same with like Underworld. Like there's so many of these movies that they come out, and years ago they wouldn't have made a sequel to these movies, but they'll make like 10 sequels today. I mean, how many Resident Evil movies are there? You know,
Yeah.
it's like
The thing is, all those films have made money, and
exactly,
that's why they just keep churning them out. They're
which is part of the problem is that
Yeah.
we I don't say me particularly, but somebody out there is paying money to see these garbage movies, and so they keep giving us more garbage, you know, and and sometimes, you know, we get a good one here or there, but for the most part, it's like it really is like, you know, I feel like if we invest 75 million into this, we'll make 300 million, and that's good. We're good with that, you know, just to keep the bottom line going, and that shouldn't be the way people make, you know, do art.
Definitely
I don't
not.
think. Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm really simplifying things here, but
Yeah.
essentially, you if you look back over the history, you know, back when you had the studio system, the people who ran the studios then were, you know, people who were passionate about film and telling stories, and then when you got that sort of you know, wave that we like to talk about, you know, the sort of maverick ones of the 70s onwards, they were lucky because they were essentially independent film directors that were kind of, to a certain extent, given free rein, because that was before the corporations started taking over the studios. And then, you know, we're in the thing now where all these studios and different platforms and whatever, they're all owned by big conglomerate corporations that are into all sorts of stuff. And then it does become about bottom line money, and it's run by, you know, accountants, lawyers, and marketeers. And it's that sort of thing that's always going to be at odds with the art and the artist, you know. And again, the films that do it best are the ones that can sort of toe that line and be, you know, entertaining with some art and integrity and message and whatever, but still do very well at the box office. And when that happens, we're going to get more of them. It's that stands to reason, you know.
Yeah, I have to say though, I think the studio system was akin to a factory. I mean, they churned films out, and
Totally.
you know, and you remember the films that we look back fondly. Think of all the hundreds and thousands of other films that nobody even talks about these days. You know, there's a massive back catalogue of stuff that, you know, it's like when we think of the 80s, we think of certain songs, but we forget about all the crap that came out back then as well. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of music that you know never sees the light of day anymore.
Well, like the home video era as well.
Yeah,
we all grew up in.
But I mean, in the day, it is a business, and
always,
you know, and if it makes money, they're going to make more of it because, you know, they just like making money. So
well, that's commerce. I mean,
it's
show business, not show art. You know, it's an industry.
But what I think has changed is, for a time there, they didn't know, the studios and, you know, didn't know quite what was making money or how to make the money, and it was kind of given to the artists because they were like magicians. They knew this dark art that created money. So they, you know, they let them sort of take the reins there for a while. But as soon as they discovered the secret of making money, they went, "Whoa, the control's back with us now. You know, we know the tricks. We know what works."
It seems like CGI was a big part of that. It seems like the CGI effects have been the thing that has catapulted this, you know, this idea of just how to make money is just you pile it with effects, tons of effects, and you don't really have to worry about the story that much. Yeah. As long as you have, you know, big creatures fighting or big, you know,
cities being destroyed.
Cities being destroyed, blue light to the sky, you know, some kind of thing. You know, it always has to be the same kinds of things. But I think, Simon, in the last podcast, you mentioned that they don't make, you know, we don't make these like $40, $50 million movies anymore. And those were the ones of our youth that were, you know, that really interesting things came out of that were fun and still popcorn movies, still that kind of thing. But really interesting ideas. And in fact, a lot of the sequels, reboots that are happening now came from those movies. Yeah. But the thing is they're not allowed to do that anymore because now, you know, and it's kind of, which is funny because taking it full circle all the way back to what you said about, is this Spielberg kind of poking at Hollywood? It could be in the sense that here I am, I'm making an original property that has nothing original in it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's true.
And he's making lots of references to films that, as we say, were made for that, you know, middle budget. I mean, the Buckaroo Banzai,
Yes,
totally. Reference.
Oh my God.
Which was a total flop when it came out. And it's only the years later, it's a cult hit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Keith, have you watched it yet?
I know. I'm embarrassed to say that was one of the references. I got it because of all the imagery, so I understood the reference. But I thought, I haven't watched the movie
I would
yet,
like to have my
I've
copy
still got
back.
Simon's Arrow Blu-ray of it. Yeah.
Do you like it, Simon?
I love it. I must admit, it's a guilty pleasure. It's crazy and weird, and I just love it. And the fact to see Jeff Goldblum dressed up as a cowboy just puts a smile on my face.
I saw it in the theater when I was a kid, and I didn't like it then. It was a little too out there as a kid.
Right.
But and I tried watching it maybe 10 years ago or so, and it still felt a little too out there for me. But I want to try that again because
try it again.
Like
I sort of discovered it sort of only like a few years ago, so. Yeah.
I think the reason I missed it first time round was because like I said, I watched lots of stuff on home video and used to get a lot of stuff, but often these were my dad was paying for it, and these were family type events, and my dad was obviously, he has certain tastes, and I think that Buckaroo Banzai was probably a little bit too out there for him to rent at the time, so
even still,
so
probably
we probably saw I'm Romancing the Stone instead or something. I don't know, but this whole by the way, this is totally geeky. I'm gonna there was one little sort of mashup visual reference in the film that I loved, and that was the fact that the DeLorean from Back to the Future also had the scanner from
Knight Rider,
from Kit from Knight Rider, and you know what? This is really nerdy, but there's a real weird bit of symmetry there because obviously the DeLorean for Back to the Future was partly designed by Andrew Probert, who did, obviously, along with Greg Jean, he built the Enterprise for Star Trek the motion picture, right? But also Ron Cobb was involved, who did all the non-Geiger stuff on Alien. But there was also a chap called Michael Sheffy that worked on the construction of the DeLorean, and he originally did kits for Glenn Larson for the TV series. So it's really weird that this thing had a sort of blend of all those things in the car. But I must admit, I chuckled at that one, and I also loved the fact they had the 60s Batmobile in there because I still love that design.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things in it that you kind of blinked and missed. I mean, I knew the Batmobile was there, but I didn't quite see it. I knew it was there in the race, but I didn't.
Even the A-Team van was there. Like you said, it is literally, we are too busy looking at Kong or the T-Rex or whatever, and there's some of those things it's sort of blink and you'll miss it. But then there was other stuff that was totally in your face, and I'm sure you were happy to see that she used the alien pulse rifle at one point as well. Yeah,
that was awesome.
Make you smile.
I mean, I knew the Akira bike was going to be in it as well from the trailers.
Course,
but that was good to see.
I was wondering whether Roger Rabbit was going to appear anywhere, but I didn't notice that. I noticed Lara Croft and obviously all the DC stuff.
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure he's in there somewhere. I mean, as you say, Zemeckis. But then again, it's owned by Disney, so maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not. And of course, we got the horror icons in there as well, which I was pleased about.
Oh, yeah. I love the Chucky grade.
That was great. Yeah, that was a great part. I got a big laugh.
Oh, it did.
None of us, though, are referencing the major nod to Spielberg, and that was the fact that one of the villains' chest was the skull from Temple of Doom.
Oh yes, okay, that's true.
Did you see Did you see the glaive from Krull?
Yes. Oh, yes.
That was great.
Yeah.
That was great.
I was like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there was so much. And like I said, these are all movies. What made me laugh is it was almost like, oh, there's an advert for movie heaven, movie hell, because it was pretty much half the films that we've talked about over the run of the show, which is quite funny.
There's another horror reference, and I don't know if you got it, but you know the old lady who lives in the stacks, who talks to Wade a couple of times, and at the end as well says to Ben Mendelsohn's character, "We know what you did. We'll remember." You know who that actress is?
Mm-mm.
No, I don't think
it's
so.
Claire Higgins, and Claire Higgins was in Hellraiser.
Oh right!
Oh, no
okay.
way.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Okay.
she's the
First
stepmother,
Hellraiser?
1 and 2.
Oh wow.
Oh wow!
She's
Okay.
the one who's resurrected in Hellbound.
Oh nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you definitely spotted one there that I missed. So well
Yeah.
done on that. I
Yeah.
like that.
It's just
I like learning stuff.
I'm a fan of this actress, and there's been a couple of times where I've been like, I want to cast her in something. I would love to work with her, because she is an actress that she was great in those 2 Hellraiser films, and she's popped up in stuff, but never she never really got her dues.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. No, absolutely. But no, I mean, for us guys, it was a reference fest. But one of the things I do want to probe a bit more into is this whole, the society aspect of it. And the reason I say that is, obviously he said, other than sort of eating, sleeping, and going to the bathroom, people would pretty much live in the oasis, right? But what I didn't understand was I was thinking, well, I mean, obviously there's all those people that would kind of live pretty much in the slums, in the stacks and stuff. But I was like, well, how do people make any money and afford to eat?
Well, they make money through the Oasis.
The Oasis,
all those coins and stuff. That's money.
Well, in the Oasis, yeah. But what about in the real world? I mean,
No, but that is real world money.
Yeah, real world. It is real world
money.
Real world money.
oh, so those Bitcoin point things they could use in the real world as well.
Yes.
Which was why he was a trillionaire at the end of it. Yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why
The
he
whole
was
point.
able to order the suit on
The suit, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Yeah,
And that's why
And actually-
people were in debt.
Yeah. Well, no, people were in prison for their debt essentially, which is where I think it does reflect society. That dystopian future could be, a reality someday if we're not really careful. So I don't know. Was it partly cautionary tale? Do you think? I don't know. It's
Kind of. I mean, just if we just talk briefly about the state of video games at the moment, because there's something happening before now that never really happened before. So in the past, you bought a game and that was it. You owned it. You didn't have to pay anything more. Maybe they did a few add-ons later on down the line, which you would you would pay for and enhance the game. But now you can buy stuff in the game. You can buy loot boxes or loot crates, which give you extra powers, or stuff that you saw in the film. When he bought like the holy hand grenade.
that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in games, there's equivalent of that. You can buy weapons that will, make you better than other players in the game.
Yep.
But you use real world money to get these things. So a game that costs like £50 now, you could end up paying thousands of pounds on top of it if you wanted to progress through the game quicker.
Yeah, I mean that's a great business model for the games companies, but like I was saying, that the thing, I mean, obviously in Ready Player One, like you said, they can use it to buy stuff in the real world, but the reality is that that system you're talking about there, they can buy stuff in the game, but they can't buy stuff in the real world, right? With credit, so you're just going to get more and more in debt, but
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah,
it's-
but I
it's-
mean, but just with Ready Player One, they take that one step further, where where real world money is now gone and everything's in game.
Yeah, which is the point of the keys and the whole point of the story. I get that.
that was the stakes.
I get it in the context of the film and in the book, but I'm just my worry is where does that sort of reflect in real society moving forward? And it's like and I'm not anti any of this stuff. I mean, I'm not anti video game or anything.
We've got Bitcoin at the moment. Now, Bitcoin is a currency that just exists in computers. There is no physical money involved.
Yeah.
It's kind of going that way. I mean, think of it. I mean,
how much Apple Pay all the time.
Apple Pay, debit cards.
I just use my phone. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and my kids love this game called Roblox. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yes, I have heard of it.
So it's an online game that's free, but if you want to do things, same thing. You have to pay for it, and you could pay. They have subscriptions where you pay so much per month, and the kids, they don't see anything wrong with that. Like, I had to spend so much time telling them this is not how the world works. We're not going to pay money to a free game. Like, this is a free game. You play the game and then that's it. But we're not going to keep dumping money into this because there's no return on this at all.
No,
like, you're just dumping money into the computer. But they're like, well, but that's what you got to do. If I want to get this little hat or I want to do this, that's how I have to play this game. And the same is true for apps. So many apps are free that then they have pay to get coins or to get some sort of way to get ahead in the game, just like you were saying. And the younger generation is totally cool with that. Our generation is not, because we didn't have that, and we grew up in the world of you buy a game and that's the game, and then you move on to the next thing, and maybe you even sell that game. There's a little bit of resale value. But they're like, you know what? Yeah, this is how it works. I'm sitting here, I'm playing my game. I want to get ahead. I don't care. What's a couple dollars? And
this is the thing as well. Now, games are not. You can buy it as like digital media. It's from an online seller, and you don't own it. That's the crazy thing. It's like if you so you buy a Blu-ray or DVD, and you get the sort of ultraviolet version, the digital download from it. You do not own it.
It's that whole music. That's happened with music in all media now. It's going that way.
So at any second, the people who run it, if they decided that they're going to stop the service, that's it. It's gone. Boom. And if you and you can pay for those films online, and I think that suddenly you're something that you pay for just gone. Your iTunes, all those songs, videos you paid for on iTunes. If anything happened to Apple decided, oh, we're stopping that now, gone, and you don't see any of it because you don't own it. This is the thing. You're paying for stuff now you don't own. You're like just leasing, and
physical media is on the decline for sure.
But that's a bad thing, because at least with physical media, you own it. It's there. You can watch it whenever you want. You can sell it on. But with all this digital stuff, you don't own it. You're just leasing it. And if they don't, and if you don't use it anymore, or you want to sell it, you can't sell it on to anybody. You can't. It's it is. I feel it's kind of a sad state of affairs, because at the end of the day, companies will own everything, and you're just leasing it off them.
Yeah, well, that's the way. I mean, without wanting to sound like an old fart, and I really don't. But Dan, you
back in my day.
No, but you've got kids, and I mean,
yes.
What is your thoughts on that? I mean, is it what Simon's saying about that being not being a good thing? I mean, obviously. What are your thoughts as a parent? Is that a good thing or not?
You mean the lack of physical media and physical owning of things?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I have to say, I'm a proponent kind of for owning cloud-based items, just because I don't like the clutter. And maybe
that's the hoarder mentality.
Yeah. So I do like having I actually do have like a lot of movies up on Vudu and those services. but and I've converted a lot of my collection to do that, just so I could watch them on a plane or wherever, which I actually really do enjoy, and I tend to watch them more. But the kids, I mean, they don't seem to care. I mean, the difference is when we were growing up, there was a social aspect to going to like a music store or a video store. And do you have Redbox over there? I don't know if you have that company.
No, we didn't have Redbox, but we do know what it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have something similar to that?
We kind of did. We had like I can't remember what the company was called, but you ordered stuff online and it was sent to your home, and you had it for like 28 days, and then you sort of put it back into an envelope and send it back to them.
The Love Film type.
That's
model,
it. Yeah.
So maybe Redbox is a little different in the sense that Redbox is like a kiosk. I mean, that it's a kiosk next to a drugstore or some other kind of store that you would rent a movie from. You just go up and you put the money in, and you get an actual physical disc out of the box. And about a year ago, I went to get one of those and had an experience I had not had for decades. And it was a movie store experience. There was a guy in front of me. He was putting a movie back in the box. And he says, "Have you seen this movie?" And I was like, "No." I didn't know the guy. He says, "Have you seen this movie?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "You've got to watch this movie. I'm putting it back in the box. As soon as I put it in, you got to get this movie. This movie's awesome." And it gave me a little glow inside, because it was an experience I just hadn't had in so long that I forgot that you even used to have those experiences. Where you were in a store and somebody be next to you and they go, "Have you played that game, or have you listened to that album? That you should pick that up. That's good stuff." And
I see the, obviously I've worked in technology for years, so I see all the sort of technological advantages of, less clutter and having less this stuff. But I also think that, I know, younger generation don't give a shit about owning stuff and having physical media. But what I always think is sad is, you go to someone's home in the future and you can't tell anything about that person, because you can't look at their music collection or their book collection or their movie collection or anything. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, that sort of aspect of society. I mean, I don't know whether it's dying, but it's diminishing slightly, isn't it? And
yes and no. Yeah. I was going to say, because rental stores there's been a kind of a little bit of resurgence. I mean, there's a few places, scattered around the place where they've come back, but
well, analog's big now, isn't it? With vinyl and people are going back to books rather than e-readers and stuff like that. So
I don't think people are going back to VHS outside of hipsters.
Oh God, no!
But I mean,
why would you?
Yeah, but I mean, it would be nice to have that kind of, going somewhere where there's other like-minded people, and as you say, have that conversation where somebody says, you should watch this, because these days there are so much films, and now we've got film streaming as well, with Netflix and Amazon, that it's, you get. I know at a weekend, me and my girlfriend will sit here and we'll go through it, and we'll just keep flicking and flicking and flicking and looking at title after title and just go, well, we don't know what to watch.
Oh, you need to be on Netpix, Claire Bueno. So, plug.
Yes.
No,
but I mean, it's a very nice site, but it's slowly building up, but there's having that one-to-one talk, somebody saying, the video clerk, the guy behind the counter going, yeah, you should rent this one, or I mean, just the fact that we don't get trailers at the beginning of our films. I mean, that used to be a massive selling point, when you used to rent a VHS and you have all those trailers at the beginning. I mean, the reason why I wanted to see Terminator was because I saw the trailer for it at the beginning of RoboCop.
Yeah.
No,
absolutely.
If it wasn't for that, I mean, I wouldn't have watched it back when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, it's got, it is that sort of, technology's changing everything and having an effect on everything. And, everything's more instantaneous and more
Yeah.
choice and quicker and better quality, and that's the way of things. But
I just want to say, as a filmmaker, I'm not against it, because I wouldn't be a filmmaker if it wasn't for that, because those doors would have been shut to me. To be an independent filmmaker now is a lot easier than it used to be. I mean, I can get my work out there.
I agree.
But unfortunately,
it's getting people to watch it.
It's getting people to watch it. That is the real challenge, yes.
At least it's in a position where people can watch it. That's the thing that you never used to have before.
Yeah.
No.
Is it? No. Yeah, you can actually point to, because Simon, you have stuff on Amazon or?
Yes, I do.
Prime,
yes.
Or, yeah. So yeah, it's like there's places.
Yeah.
No,
nice.
Absolutely. and what about? I mean, are you guys big gamers yourself, or not so much?
Yeah, I play games. Yeah.
A complicated question. I used to be, when I was growing up, I was a massive gamer, and I had a home computer. I mean, my first computer was an Acorn Electron, and I then had a massive jump from that to a Commodore Amiga, and used to play every game on the Sun, and then consoles came along. So I had a Sega, I had a Nintendo, and then at some point my brother took over that, and he would buy all the game machines, so I'd play his. But then as I've gotten older, I've had less and less time to sort of play games. I don't own a console at the moment, so I don't really get to play those games. I mean, I play a few games. The last game I played on my Mac was XCOM 2, which I really enjoyed, because I remember the game back in the day, and it was a great update to it, because it's still got the strategy, but it's a bit more accessible. It's a bit more arcade, and so I really like that. And I do play one game on my phone, which is Star Wars based.
There you go. No, I mean, I'm kind of the same. I mean, I grew up, the home video era was kind of akin to the sort of home computer era, and the computer games consoles and all that sort of stuff. So, it used to be, which obviously was a progression from the arcade games, and used to be into it. But nowadays, between the amount of films, TV shows, books to read or listen to, podcasts, etc., I tend not to get too involved, although I think it's all very cool. But the reason I brought up the question is I was chatting to somebody that I know who is a big gamer, and I think they might have the same problem with Ready Player One that they had with they mentioned the film Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, the latest one, which I thought was I thought that was incredibly entertaining, by the way. I thought that was a really kind of fun film, and an interesting sort of sequel. But their problem with Jumanji was the fact that there was only 3 levels to get through on the game, and that wasn't. And I said, well, hold on, it was supposed to be a retro console game anyway, but I sort of said also, artistic license, this is all part of telling a story in a movie, 2-hour type thing. But thinking about it, they might also have, I guess, the same problem with Ready Player One, because I guess the amount of levels that there were is nothing compared to the life you can live in a video game, I guess. But I just
are we gonna
wondered how many hours you guys spend.
I've heard similar complaints, especially seen. I saw the review of this by Red Letter Media, and one of the guys on that did bring up the fact that the first thing that most gamers would probably try doing is actually drive backwards in a car in a car simulation, because that's the way gamers work. They just try and do things that are completely different. I know in the OASIS, because there's kind of everything kind of feels real, that you probably wouldn't want to do that. But you would imagine 5 years of this going on, somebody would have thought, you know what, I'm going to try driving, I'm just going to go in reverse, see what happens.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to the gaming part, it's not quite there. But then, as we know as filmmakers, that at the end of the day, it's got to serve the story. So at that point, it's the character realizes this, this thing that Halliday has said, and then tries it and realizes, oh, okay, so this really works, and then so on to the next clue, and then trying to figure that out. So it's just kind of showing that his, that Percival stroke Wade is, akin to Halliday, that he's a kind of, I guess, like a kindred spirit, somebody who thinks the same way he does, and who would be a good, benefactor of running the OASIS.
Yeah. I don't think you could show 18 levels of complexity.
Yes,
in a 2-hour movie.
That would be a lot. That would be a series, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You certainly lose your audience pretty quick.
Indeed.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is the thing about films that are based on video games or have a video game element to it. It can't act like a video game, because at the end of the day, all it would be is cutscenes, and there's nothing worse than watching somebody playing a game and sitting through cutscenes, or nothing worse than watching somebody playing a game.
Well, you say that. I know people, again, they're younger, but I know people that actually watch YouTube videos of people playing games and are really into that.
But I think there's a difference between watching a video on YouTube where you're trying to learn ways of doing stuff, because that's usually what you're watching for, than sitting with your friends and watching somebody play a game.
You know what's funny though, is my son played through an entire game 3 times, and he still watches people online play that same game. And I'm like, you've already beat this game 3 times. Why would you watch this kid play this game that you already know exactly what's going to happen? And so there is something generational to that. That might be the next level of filmmaking, is just watching people play video games. Which I don't understand it at all. Zero.
I mean, do you think it's going to be virtual reality? Do you think that's the being completely immersed like this is?
Well, I mean that's another facet of video games. I mean at the moment we've got that Star Wars, is it The Void? Going around at the moment, so that's sort of doing good things. I mean, it's for virtual reality. I mean, I think the what we see in the film concerning virtual reality, that's kind of how it would work. It would either be like a massive seat, or it would be like what did he have?
Like a pad or something.
Yeah,
like a walking treadmill thing.
Treadmill, that's it. That's the word I was looking for. So to have that sort of movement without you banging into things.
That was something I didn't understand, is when they showed the battle at the end, they showed like 5 people who were in the game Master Chief running through the street.
Yes. Yeah,
like,
that.
Wait a minute, didn't they just...
that was the thing that I thought was, I thought that scene was really enjoyable. But now you saying that, yeah, they would be like, it would be so
smashed.
Yeah, they would just be running into things, and you would just see like the computer characters just be walking into invisible walls and stuff. So.
Yeah, that was the part that made no sense to me, was when they would show people in the real world physically doing the same things. I'm like, no, that doesn't work. Yeah, you're running into traffic and stuff. Like, what? That's not working.
Well, I mean, it's going to get to a point where it's a holodeck, isn't it? That's what that's what it's going to be. But I always kind of had problems with that concept though, because I thought to myself, if you have a holodeck where you can be anyone and do anything, and obviously in that case, in a society where money doesn't matter either, why would you ever leave? It's like, why would you ever go back to the real world?
in Star Trek, because they're out there in the galaxy discovering new worlds, But then didn't Next Generation kind of cover that with the character of Barclay?
Oh right, yes, but he probably did. I've not seen that episode in a long time, but yes. Probably.
Yeah, I think they did cover that. So it is a topic that they. But then again, that was the thing about the OASIS. I mean, I think am I right in saying that there was a line of the voiceover that was used in the trailer but not used in the film when he talked about in the trailer that that his generation was the lost generation because
Yes.
yeah,
which is us.
Wait a minute.
it's not us, but I mean the fact that because everybody was in the Oasis, that they didn't exist in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your interpretation of
Yeah,
Lost
but I'm just
Generation.
saying. I'm just
of
saying
people
it was
say
a line
Generation
that
X
was.
is-
Yeah, but I'm just saying there was a line in the trailer. It was used in the trailer, but I don't remember it being in the film.
No, I don't. I don't remember.
I don't remember it either,
I've only
yeah.
seen the film the once, but
Yeah. I
But,
think they dropped that. I think they dropped that line.
right, yeah, because it is
But-
confusing.
Yeah.
But his would be the lost generation because they grew up in the world of the Oasis.
Mm.
So there is no like human interaction. I think that's actually the interesting thing with the commentary of that world, which is similar to what Black Mirror does in just about every episode. But it's this idea that that's what we're doing, and that's what we've been talking about is that we're getting more and more and more reliant on this technology and less on human interaction.
Mm.
So social media, games, whatever it is taking us out of the human element of things, where you don't get the guy telling you to watch the movie, or you don't get what your friends did on vacation without ever seeing them, and all these different things. So there's like no reason to talk anymore because it's all just there for you at all times personally.
Yeah,
And that's kind of in the Oasis. It seems like his generation, because he was young, would have grown up just in the Oasis. So they never really met people in the real world. Not really. I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's kind of a sad way to experience things. I mean, this is where Generation X, us guys, I think we're quite lucky because we kind of grew up in
both.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We remember the time before the internet and before all this technology, and so. But at the same time, we grew up with it evolving around us, so we can appreciate it and use it and love it, but also we know how to kind of work without it as well. I mean,
Exactly.
I'm glad I know how to read a map. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, we've got the good sense not to drive on railway tracks or into a river.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just because the sat nav told us that that's the best way to go.
I know. I never understand those stories.
Yeah. Turn left here. What, into the river?
Okay.
We do probably sound like old farts though about this. It's if you play this to your kids, Dan, they'll be like, "What the hell, Dad?
Are you kidding me?"
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
But,
Well, I mean, that's the thing is just being present in the moment and not pulling your phone out to film something or take a picture is a tough thing to do.
Mm.
It's tough to, because it's so easy. It's tough to I'm going to enjoy this moment in life looking at it, whether it be a concert or, like today, my son, he played his first flag American football game.
Okay.
And he got a touchdown, like on his first play, got a touchdown, which, a score on his first play. And I didn't even have my phone out. I was watching it and it happened. And I was like, that's cool. I saw that, I got to just see it live and
you
enjoy
didn't
it.
see it for a screen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was.
It's a balance, isn't it? It is
Exactly.
Yeah, I just want to say on that, I've shot a lot of sort of, I would say, school concerts, but we're not talking assembly here. We're talking like in sort of venues like the Royal Albert Hall and stuff like that.
Nice.
Yeah. But the one thing that's always sort of troubled me, so I'm trying to film, and in the shot, all I can see is bloody iPhones and iPads of all the parents filming their kids, and to the point where they'll actually get in front of my camera, somebody who's doing a professional job, just to get a good shot. I mean, I've had to have a few words with them, but then
You say buy the video.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But then the thing is, so all these people, they filmed all this stuff, and then what do they do with it? Because I mean, the stuff that I've shot on my iPhone or I filmed, I just sort of tend to put up online, and then that's it. I'd never go revisit it again.
Right.
Yeah, more unstructured data out there to manage. It's a problem.
I just wondered, so all these parents who are doing all this stuff, I mean, are they actually I mean, Dan, as you're a father, do you go back and revisit this stuff, or is it just up online?
I actually do, because I don't really put it up online.
Oh, okay.
So I do, yeah. So I actually do revisit the videos, and sometimes we'll sit around and we'll watch videos, kind of like in the old days when you'd watch slideshows or something at your house.
Yeah.
So, but I know I'm not the norm. I mean, most people when they're doing that, they want it to put it online, and basically they're bragging. They're like, look what my kid's doing right now, right this second. And so they can get that video out there to, grandma and grandpa or something like that within, as it's happening.
Yeah.
They may even periscope it. I was at a convention this past week for, it was Broadcasters Convention, and I was watching a session. Yeah, NAB. Yeah.
I know it well. Yeah.
So I was watching a conversation with the editor of, dare I say, The Last Jedi.
You said it.
And I said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said it. I won't say it again.
You've got to put some money in the Bitcoin box.
Exactly. Sorry. The Bitcoin swing jar. Exactly. So I'm watching him, and I didn't expect to see him there. I didn't know he was going to be there. I just happened to be walking by, and they said, this guy's coming out. And I said, well, that'll be interesting. I'm going to watch that. So as I'm watching it, this lady comes in front of me with her phone, and she's got this thing on Facebook Live. She's showing him to somebody. I don't know who, her family, her friends. I don't know. But it's like, just watch the guy. What are you getting from this? That you can't just, what is whoever watching it getting it, except you're just trying to brag. Look who I'm seeing here. I'm seeing the editor of that movie that was just made about Star Wars. And,
yeah. I mean, there is that fine line, as with all these things with technology and whatever, between, it's wonderful that you can share something with we're recording a podcast, for God's sake, but the fact that you can share something with someone on the other side of the world, very quickly and instantaneously, absolutely, and all this sort of thing, and include people and all of that. But you're right. There's an awful lot of shit that's just put up as basically what I call brag book, and it's like
100%.
Oh, look at me, look how great I am, look where I am, and all this sort of thing, and that's the hardest thing of all nowadays is filtering. It's just filtering the stuff that's relevant from the stuff that's just nonsense.
Right. I mean, how many pictures of people's food do you need to see?
Oh, God.
Like, it's like, I don't care.
Especially when I'm on a diet. I don't want to see that.
Yeah. But it's just the world we live in. I mean, that's why this movie really does speak to that kind of idea that kids who are growing up with this, they weren't like us and grew up without this technology. So they're completely embracing it and know nothing else. I mean, they didn't know a time when the internet didn't exist, which is, insane to think about, really. So all these things, I mean, it's like us in the color television or something, like our parents would say, I remember when it was only black and white, or we didn't have a television, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was like 4 channels in color. That was normal. And I'd get my dad going, oh, remember when we only had 2 and it was black and white, and or we had to, and my parents had to gather around the radiogram.
Yep, exactly. But I mean, now the internet is so robust in what it can do, and then it gives us access to all this stuff, but also gives us access to each other in a way we've never had access before. And I don't know that it's the best thing, honestly, for society. And I don't think that it puts us in the right direction. And I wonder if in the future there's going to be actual laws and things that go into place over what can be and what can't be on the internet, in a sense, not like the content, and not net neutrality, that kind of thing, but like on Facebook, things with bullying and all these other kinds of things that you could actually get arrested for doing something on Facebook, which I guess you can already.
You can, There's been people arrested for tweets and stuff.
It's like any tool. It's like any tool. A tool is there to help with something, but it can be abused.
Yes.
You can hammer a nail into a piece of wood, or you can whack someone round the head with it and kill them. It's that age-long thing, unfortunately. And but I often wonder, Dan, and I don't know whether you ever think about this, but me and Simon have been doing this now for a couple of years with these podcasts, and I almost feel like it's I've often joked it's like it's almost therapeutic. It's almost like recording my memoirs, or while I can remember them or something. But I wonder,
on this day, April
when
13th.
when we were at film school, right? Me, James, and Rod, amongst others, but the four of us in particular, we used to sit in a coffee shop or whatever, and we'd argue and talk about films and TV shows and art and all this sort of stuff for hours, right? And I think,
Absolutely.
had this existed back then, would we have been doing our podcast? Would we have been having the the Fab Four film fuck up or whatever we call it? You know what I mean?
Totally.
Would we have been doing that? And I think, God, that would have been kind of nice to have had in some respects,
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And same is true with YouTube and these other video sites. If they had existed when we were really making stuff back then, what would we have done? Would we have done the same types of things? Because I feel like we were more interested in doing more narrative type, films and ideas, but people these days are doing, getting kicked in the nuts and stuff like that, just making little videos of them doing crazy stuff just to get hits on YouTube. And it makes me wonder, like, I don't know, what would we have thought about that? Would we have, I would hope that I wouldn't want to be doing videos like that, but you don't know. If you grew up in the world where that existed, because my daughter, believe it or not, she has a YouTube page. And she puts her own videos on there. She makes her own videos and she puts them on. She's 10 years old, and she does it all on her iPhone. And they're not bad videos. They're little.
Does that scare you though, to a certain extent? I mean, the fact that it's out there for anyone to see, if you know what I mean.
Well, a little bit. I try to, we try to keep it so her name's not on there and things like
that.
So
right.
We try to keep it, very
private,
anonymous if possible.
Yeah.
But she is obsessed with getting hits. Obsessed. So she'll check that thing constantly about, did I get hits? Do I have followers? That kind of thing. And she's 10 years old. Yeah. So it's like, that's the kind of world we're growing up in here, and the youth are growing up in, and who knows what's going to come of this.
Yeah.
And maybe the OASIS isn't our future. Who knows?
Yeah. it's something that's filtered into Hollywood as well. It's when they look at actors and directors and the sort of marquee names, they also look at, well, what are their sort of social media like? How many people are following them? How many people are liking their stuff? And it's just like, we've seen it where they put sort of YouTube stars and Twitter stars into films and stuff, and they've been fucking awful, because
yes,
at the end of the day, what they do online is completely different. They're not an actor. They haven't studied their craft. They're just somebody who people find entertaining online.
Well, I think that's another thing that's been kind of interesting about the digital filmmaking revolution, is that there have been people who've come out, and some of these young directors that we talked about earlier have come out of YouTube pages who maybe did like an effects reel or something that was really incredible. And then they get a shot. Josh Trank, I think, was one of those. Maybe he's flamed out already. I don't know, but
or
but
flamed on.
Yeah. Oh, good one.
Sorry, I had to go there.
Very nice, but Chronicle was a good movie.
Yeah,
I thought, at least. It was, and it was better than it should have been for what it was at the time. And a lot of these guys have done those kind of movies that were better than they should have been, and women as well. And so, had they not had the access to the technology that they have now, would they've ever been noticed? Or is it, is this a talent that would have just completely squandered in the wilderness forever, and then ended up becoming a lawyer, and just moved on with their life,
That's always been a thing when it comes to Hollywood. So in the 70s, you had directors that came out of film school, and then sort of 80s and 90s, you had music video directors.
Music video,
yeah. And now you're getting guys who've made a lot of YouTube videos or film, shorts that have been shown on YouTube, which get a lot of hits. I mean, I think of the guy who did District 9. His short, Neil Blomkamp. The fact that his short was huge online, which was the basis for District 9. And it will come from somewhere else as well, coming down the line. What that will be, we don't know yet. But but yeah, it's whatever gets people's attention. I mean, and at the moment, it does seem to be effects driven. If you look at these videos that are being picked up, it's because it's like, wow, look, it's amazing visuals. Look, there's like spaceships over South Africa, and aliens, and robots battling, and all that kind of stuff. And and I must admit, I've lost a lot of work to guys like that, or guys who sort of can do special effects, because producers feel that, hey, they can direct and do the special effects at the same time,
for cut rate.
Get a 2-for-1.
Yeah. Now, it is interesting. I must admit, I didn't realize at the beginning of this conversation we were going to get so philosophical about the whole thing.
The OASIS is much deeper than we thought.
Yes,
it is. But I mean, Dan, you mentioned, obviously Black Mirror.
Yes.
And which I'm a massive fan of that show.
Absolutely.
And I think Charlie Brooker has done a really good job of basically taking this idea of society and technology and sort of turning them into these sort of cautionary tale anthologies like he's done. And I think there is a lot of truth in fiction sometimes about that stuff. And it can be used as a positive and a negative, and who knows, but
I mean, it's a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways.
It is.
It really is.
It is a double-edged sword, that's for sure.
That's
and any other cliche we can think of. Yes.
I can't think of one more.
But yes, art can be used to shine a light on current events. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, even Star Trek did it back in the day.
Science fiction particularly is good at that.
Yeah, and I think Black Mirror has been great for that. I think it's
very good.
So maybe Ready Player One is more than just popcorn, in the fact that it's actually spurned this conversation, which it's there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah. End of the day, it is a popcorn film, but it just has so many connotations around it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you took the Oasis and you took all the nostalgia stuff out of it, it's just a very simple story. It's about a guy who has to pass these 3 quests to get the prize.
Yeah, right. And there is some people have mainly sort of feminists have complained a little bit about the somewhat stalkery aspect of it, or to get the girl. But
I don't see that. I mean, I have to say that Parsival Wade, he's a very bland character. I mean, the other characters surrounding him are much more interesting, including the girl played by Olivia Cook. I mean, she was a far more interesting character.
Agreed.
But I think absolutely. I think people are referring to the book more there. Apparently in the book he does a lot more stalkery stuff.
Yeah, because in the book he doesn't meet the girl until the end.
That's right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of changes, which I feel a film has to do, because a book is a book and a film is a film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I must admit, I'm about to start a new job next week in technology and media, and it is going to involve probably a fair amount of driving. So I'm quite tempted to. I know now, again, because of streaming, now we can get audio books that are unabridged. They're no longer limited to what a CD can hold. And I may well invest in Ready Player One and have a listen to the book as well whilst on my journeys. That might be quite a good idea, as comparison.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it.
Oh yeah, we could literally talk about this all night. But, as we used to, Dan, if memory serves.
Oh, we absolutely did. In the wee hours.
In the wee hours, and fights and arguments. I never forget some of those arguments.
Physical aggression.
Yeah. What was that about?
Oh gosh.
Passion. It's all about being passionate.
Yep.
So, Dan, is there anywhere people can go to find out more about your work?
Well, like I said last time and a little bit this time, I don't really have a social media presence. So,
which is hilarious. Based on what we've just been talking about.
I know. So the only way, and this actually goes back in the conversation, the best way to follow me is to find me actually in Central Florida and then actually start walking behind me.
You hang out at red box machines.
Exactly.
On the corner of shopping market.
And then what you do is you just walk at the same pace behind me, and that is following me to the next location.
Hey, there's a film there.
That's right.
I've got it now. The Red Box Stalker. There you go.
Find and follow the Red Box Stalker. And if you want, you can give me a thumbs up too. I'd be happy to get the thumbs up.
Just don't poke him. No, don't poke him.
That's right. No, don't poke him.
You just watch where you're putting that thumb or poking that finger.
Exactly.
Oh dear.
Keith, where can people find your work?
Okay, well, if you want to see, if you can sit through short films, 10 minutes long, that I've written, produced, and directed, then go to YouTube and go to British Eyles, which is EYLES, as in my last name, and there are examples there. And with regards to other work that I've done or am working on, just plonk me into IMDb, and you can read more there.
And as always, you can find my work at independentrunnings.com. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and all good podcast providers. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. And please leave us a rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher. It all helps.
Oh, it does. In fact, a shout out to a good friend of mine. Ross Shepherd did leave us a very good review on iTunes, which we appreciate.
Yes.
Very same week as we got a really bad review, if memory serves.
Yes. Yeah. If that guy is listening, you know who
you are.
No. He didn't like me saying you know.
I see.
You know. So this is for you, Hope it's driving you mad.
Well, hey, you're making it, when you get some haters out there.
That reminds me of something, that I know about,
We could do this all night.
You know what I'm talking about.
We're having too much fun. Yes.